Ma'am, we couldn't find your daughter. We're calling off the search.
No, please, you can't stop. You have to find my daughter. She's alone in the wild.
Doing everything we can.
Please, she's just a child.
Sign it, now.
I can't, please.
You have no choice.
Why are you doing this? No, please, let me go.
Calm down. It's okay.
I can't, please.
Shh, I have you.
The search commander slammed his fist on the table and said the words that made a mother collapse to her knees. We're calling off the search. The child is dead. 11 days. 264 hours. A 3-year-old girl lost in the Siberian wilderness, where temperatures drop to freezing at night, where brown bears hunt for easy prey, where wolf packs can smell blood from miles away. No child survives that. Not even adults survive that. But here's what the search commander didn't know. Here's what the helicopters couldn't see. Here's what the thermal imaging completely missed. Karina Chikitova wasn't alone in that forest. A scruffy, half-starved puppy named Naida had followed the little girl into the wilderness. And for 11 days, through freezing nights, through predator encounters, through moments that should have killed them both, this dog did something that scientists still cannot fully explain. She kept the child alive. She became her blanket when temperatures dropped. She became her protector when predators circled. She became her food finder when starvation set in. And when Karina was too weak to move, when death was hours away, Naida made a decision that changed everything. She left the girl, ran 9 miles through dense forest, found the village, barked until humans followed her, and led rescuers straight back to Karina. This isn't a fairy tale. This happened in 2014 in the Sakha Republic of Russia. And what this dog did will change how you see loyalty, instinct, and miracles forever. If you've ever loved a dog, ever doubted miracles, or ever needed proof that God sends help in unexpected forms, this story is for you. It was a Tuesday morning in late July when everything changed. The sun rose over the village of Olam at 4:47 a.m. In this part of Siberia, summer days stretch almost endlessly. 20 hours of sunlight that make the taiga forest feel deceptively welcoming. It's a lie. The forest is never welcoming. It only pretends. This was not a place for a child to wander. But 3-year-old Karina didn't know that. The Chikitova family lived in a small wooden house on the edge of the village, just 200 meters from where the tree line began. It was a humble home. No running water, no electricity past what a generator could provide. They heated with wood. They survived on what they could grow, hunt, and herd. But they were happy. Radayon Chikitova, the father, was a cattle herder. Every few days, he walked deep into the forest to check on the family's livestock, which grazed in clearings several miles from the village. It was dangerous work. Bears were common, and more than one herder had never returned from such trips. But Radayon had done it hundreds of times. He knew the forest. The forest, he believed, knew him. That morning, Radayon woke before dawn. He dressed quietly, grabbed his walking stick, and slipped out of the house without waking his wife or children. He didn't know his 3-year-old daughter was watching through half-closed eyes. He didn't know she had decided to follow him. Karina Chikitova was 3 years and 4 months old. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn spirit. She was the kind of child who ran before she walked, who climbed before she crawled, who asked why so many times that adults eventually gave up answering. She adored her father. When Radayon worked in the yard, Karina followed him. When he sat by the fire at night, she curled up in his lap. When he walked toward the forest, she watched from the window, waving until he disappeared into the trees. But this morning, watching wasn't enough. She had woken up that morning with one mission: follow her father into the forest to check on the family's cattle. Her father, a herder, made this trip regularly. Karina had watched him leave dozens of times. Karina waited until her father's figure had shrunk to a tiny at the edge of the forest. Then she slid out of bed, walked past her sleeping mother, pushed open the front door, and stepped outside. She was barefoot. She wore only a thin summer dress, pink with small white flowers. She carried nothing. No food, no water, no understanding of what she was walking into. She just wanted to be with her papa. Naida, the family's dog, was sleeping on the porch. When Karina walked past, The dog's ears perked up. She lifted her head, watched the little girl toddle toward the forest, and made a decision of her own. Where Karina went, Naida went. Always, asterisk, asterisk. The dog stood, stretched, and followed. Neither of them would return for 11 days. Karina walked with purpose for the first several hundred meters. She could see her father's footprints in the soft earth. At least, she thought she could. She followed what she believed was his path, calling out occasionally, "Papa, Papa, wait." Her voice was swallowed by the trees. The Siberian taiga is not like other forests. It's ancient, dense, endless. The same species of trees, larch, pine, spruce, repeat for thousands of miles in every direction. There are no landmarks, no distinguishing features. Even experienced hunters carry compasses and GPS devices, and even then, some never make it home. For a 3-year-old, it was a labyrinth with no exit. Karina didn't realize she was lost until she could no longer see the village behind her. She turned around. Trees. She turned again. More trees. Every direction looked identical. The same brown trunks, the same green canopy, the same soft earth beneath her bare feet. Asterisco, asterisco, papa. Naida circled the sobbing child, confused. She could smell the village behind them, faintly, but it was there. She could have turned around and found her way home easily. Dogs navigate by scent, and Naida knew every smell within miles of Oolong. But leaving wasn't an option. Naida had followed this little girl since Karina was an infant. She had slept beside her crib. She had guarded her first steps. She had licked away tears from scraped knees and stolen food from Karina's plate when no one was looking. This was her human, her responsibility, her pack. So Naida did the only thing she knew to do. She lay down beside Karina, pressed her warm body against the crying child, and waited. Back in the village, Karina's mother woke at 7:30 a.m. The house was quiet, too quiet. Karina? No answer. She checked the bedroom. Empty. The kitchen. Empty. The porch. Empty. The first wave of panic hit her like a physical blow. Karina. She ran outside, scanning the yard. Nothing. She checked the neighbor's house. Nothing. She ran to the edge of the forest, screaming her daughter's name until her throat burned. Nothing. 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 Asterisk, asterisk. By 8 a.m., the entire village knew. By 9 a.m., the first search party had formed. By noon, word had reached the regional authorities, and helicopters were being dispatched from Yakutsk, nearly 300 kilometers away. The largest search operation in the region's recent history was about to begin. The search began within hours. Villagers dropped everything. Farmers left their fields. Hunters grabbed their rifles. Word spread through the remote community like wildfire, and soon dozens of people were combing the forest, calling Karina's name. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, nothing. Day 3, helicopters joined the search. Thermal imaging. Professional rescue teams flown in from the nearest city hundreds of miles away. Still nothing. By day 5, whispers started. She's gone. No child survives out there. The wolves. Karina's mother refused to accept it. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. She stood at the edge of the forest, screaming her daughter's name until her voice gave out. But the officials were preparing to deliver the news no parent should hear. Here's what nobody knew yet. While the search parties wandered in wrong directions, while helicopters scanned the wrong sectors, while experts calculated that survival was impossible, a skinny, devoted puppy was doing the impossible. Naida had followed Karina into the forest, and she had no intention of leaving her. But Karina was already miles into the forest, walking deeper with every hour, moving further from any hope of rescue. And she had no idea. If you can feel the terror of that mother right now, the panic of realizing your child is gone, I need you to do something. Hit that like button, not because it helps me, because every like tells the algorithm that this story matters. That stories of survival, of loyalty, of impossible miracles deserve to be heard. Your single click could put this video in front of a parent who needs hope today, a child who needs to believe in miracles, a person who needs to know that even in the darkest forest, they're not alone. Like this video now. And let me tell you what happened when the sun went down on day 1. Because that's when Karina almost died for the first time. At 10:47 p.m., the sun finally set over the taiga. In most parts of the world, sunset is gradual, a slow fade from light to dark, giving humans and animals time to adjust. But in Siberia, at this latitude, the sun hangs on the horizon for hours before suddenly plunging below the tree line. When darkness came, it came fast. Karina had been walking for over 14 hours. Her feet were raw and bleeding from rocks, roots, and thorns she couldn't see in the undergrowth. Her legs trembled with exhaustion. She had cried so much that no more tears would come. But the worst was yet to come. The temperature began to drop. During Siberian summer days, temperatures can reach 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Warm, almost pleasant. But at night they plummet. Sometimes to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Sometimes lower. And for a child wearing nothing but a thin cotton dress, with no shelter and no fire, it was a death sentence. Karina felt the cold creep into her bones within the first hour of darkness. She started shivering, small trembles at first, then violent, uncontrollable shaking that made her teeth chatter and her muscles cramp. She didn't understand what was happening. She just knew she was colder than she had ever been in her life. "Mama," she whimpered. "Mama, I'm cold." But Mama was 9 miles away, collapsed in a chair at the search command center, being told that helicopters couldn't fly at night and that the search would resume at dawn. Dawn was 8 hours away. Karina wouldn't survive 8 hours. Not like this. Naida was not a remarkable dog by any standard. She was a mixed breed, mostly Siberian hunting dog with some unknown lineage thrown in. She was small for her breed, maybe 40 pounds soaking wet. Her fur was matted in places. She was perpetually hungry, surviving on scraps from the village. But Naida had one thing no search party possessed. She loved Karina. The little girl had been Naida's favorite human since she was a baby. When Karina played in the yard, Naida was there. When Karina napped on the porch, Naida curled up beside her. They were inseparable. The dog had never experienced anything like this. She had been cold before. Siberian winters were brutal, and even village dogs learned to find shelter or die. But she had always had options. A porch to hide under, a barn to sneak into, a human to let her inside. Here, there was nothing. Nothing except Karina. Naida watched the little girl shake, watched her curl into a ball on the forest floor, watched her whimpers grow weaker as the cold drained the energy from her small body. And then Naida made a decision that would save Karina's life. She walked over to the shivering child, positioned herself directly on top of her, and lay down. Not beside her, on top of her. Naida was not a large dog, maybe 40 pounds at most, and skinny from a life of scavenging. But she covered as much of Karina's body as she could, pressing her belly against the child's back, draping her legs over Karina's arms, tucking her furry head against the girl's neck. A living blanket. A 40-pound heating system. ***. Dogs run hot. Their normal body temperature is between 101 and 102.5 degrees Fahrenheit, several degrees warmer than humans. And now, all of that warmth was being transferred directly to Karina. The shivering began to slow. Karina's whimpers faded. Her breathing steadied. She fell asleep. But the cold wasn't the only danger in the darkness. Approximately 2 miles to the north, a brown bear was foraging. Siberian brown bears are among the largest land predators on Earth. Males can weigh over 1,500 pounds. They can run at speeds exceeding 35 miles per hour. They can smell prey from miles away. And they're always hungry. This particular bear, a female with 2 cubs, had been tracking an interesting scent for the past several hours. Something unusual. Something that didn't belong in this part of the forest. Human and dog. ***. The bear moved slowly through the undergrowth, following her nose. Her cubs trailed behind, learning to hunt by watching their mother. They were perhaps a mile away now, then half a mile, then close enough that the sound of breaking twigs might have been audible if anyone was awake to hear. Naida heard. The dog's ears, capable of detecting sounds 4 times farther than human ears, picked up the distant movement. Her nose, 10,000 times more sensitive than any human's, caught the first traces of bear scent on the wind. She didn't move from her position on top of Karina. She couldn't. If she left, the child would freeze. But she started growling, low at first, a rumble deep in her chest that vibrated through her body and into Karina below. Then louder, a clear warning, a declaration. This is my territory. This is my pack. Come closer and there will be consequences. Asterisk, asterisk. It was absurd, really. A 40-pound dog threatening a 1,000-pound bear. If the bear had pressed forward, Naida would have been dead in seconds. Karina would have followed. But bears are not mindless killers. They're intelligent, careful, and generally prefer to avoid conflict when possible. The mother bear heard the growling, smelled the strange combination of dog and human, and made a calculation. Was this potential meal worth the risk? What if the dog had diseases? What if there were more humans nearby? What if the growling attracted other predators? She turned around. The bear and her cubs disappeared into the darkness, moving away from the strange sounds, searching for easier prey. Naida kept growling for another 20 minutes, just to be sure. Then she lay her head back down and slept. Karina woke with the dawn, confused and disoriented. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. She felt warm, warmer than expected, and something heavy was pressing down on her. She opened her eyes and found herself staring directly into Naida's face. The dog licked her nose. Naida! Karina's voice was hoarse, her throat raw from crying and cold. Good girl. She pushed herself up, and Naida rolled off, stretching and yawning as if they had just woken from a normal night's sleep. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Then Karina's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten in over 20 hours. She hadn't had water in almost as long. She was hungry, achingly, desperately hungry, in a way she had never experienced before. She looked around the forest. Trees, bushes, dirt, nothing that looked like food. I'm hungry, she said to Naida, as if the dog could help. Naida's ears perked up, and then, unbelievably, asterisk, asterisk, she did help. Asterisk, asterisk. Right now, before I tell you how a dog taught a 3-year-old to survive in the wilderness, I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel. I know you've heard that request 1,000 times. I know it can feel meaningless, but here's why it matters. Stories like this, stories of impossible survival, unbreakable loyalty, everyday miracles, they need to be told. And they need to be heard by people who are losing hope. When you subscribe, you're not just supporting a channel. You're voting for a world that celebrates courage over cynicism, faith over fear, love over logic, asterisk, asterisk. Subscribe now. Turn on notifications. Because what happens next in this story will change how you see animals forever. And you don't want to miss a single moment. Karina had never eaten wild berries before. In a village, food came from specific places, the garden, the storage cellar, the occasional trip to a market in a larger town. The idea of eating something off a random bush was foreign to her. But Naida knew. The dog had spent her entire life supplementing her diet with whatever the forest provided. She knew which berries were sweet and safe. She knew which mushrooms to avoid. She knew where to find water, how to catch insects, and how to survive when humans forgot to feed her. Now she would teach Karina. The dog walked away from the sleeping spot, nose to the ground, sniffing methodically. Karina followed. She always followed Naida. They walked for perhaps 10 minutes before Naida stopped at a bush covered in small, dark berries. Blueberries. Wild Siberian blueberries. Naida looked at Karina, then at the berries, then back at Karina. She nosed at the fruit, knocking several to the ground. The little girl watched, confused. Naida picked up a berry in her mouth, chewed it, swallowed. Then she nosed more berries toward Karina's feet. For me, Karina bent down, picked up a berry, and put it in her mouth. It was the sweetest thing she had ever tasted. She ate until her fingers were stained purple, until her stomach stopped hurting, until she finally felt something other than desperate hunger. The dog watched her the entire time, tail wagging slowly. But food without water is only half the equation. By midday, Karina's thirst was overwhelming. Her lips were cracked. Her throat felt like sandpaper. She tried to ask Naida for help, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. Naida understood anyway. The dog had been panting, her own way of managing thirst and heat, but she knew where water could be found. She always knew. Water had a smell, a sound, a feel in the air that her senses could detect from remarkable distances. She started walking. Karina followed. 20 minutes later, they reached a stream. It wasn't large, maybe 3 feet across, barely 6 inches deep, but to Karina, it looked like paradise. She fell to her knees at the edge, plunged her face into the cold water, and drank. She drank until she couldn't drink anymore. When she finally lifted her head, gasping, Naida was beside her, lapping at the water with her long pink tongue. The dog looked up at the girl, water dripping from her muzzle. For a moment, they just looked at each other. 2 creatures, lost in the wilderness, completely dependent on each other. A child who had no idea how to survive. A dog who had every reason to save herself, but refused to leave. Partners. Days 2 through 5 followed a pattern. They would wake at dawn, Karina covered by Naida's warm body. They would walk, sometimes in circles, sometimes in what felt like straight lines, searching for something familiar. They would find berries, eat. They would find water, drink. They would walk more until Karina's legs gave out. Then they would sleep again, and the cycle would repeat. Karina stopped crying after day 3. She stopped calling for her parents after day 4. By day 5, something had shifted inside her. She was no longer waiting to be rescued. She was surviving. She learned to recognize the berry bushes by sight. She learned to follow Naida's nose to water. She learned to curl into a tight ball at night so the dog could cover more of her body. She learned to read Naida's signals, the low growl that meant danger, the excited whine that meant food, the soft whimper that meant stay close to me. They became a pack. It happened on day 6. They were walking through a particularly dense section of forest when Naida froze. Her ears went rigid. Her hackles rose. A growl began deep in her throat. Karina knew what that meant now. Bear! She whispered. Naida didn't move. She was staring at something ahead, something Karina couldn't see through the undergrowth. Then Karina heard it. Breathing. Heavy, rhythmic breathing. Something large. Something close. And then the bushes parted, and Karina saw her first brown bear. It was enormous, far larger than anything she had ever seen. Its head was the size of Karina's entire body. Its claws, visible even from 30 feet away, looked like curved knives. Its small eyes fixed on the girl with an expression that was impossible to read. Karina couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think, asterisk, asterisk. She was frozen, locked in place by a terror so complete that her body simply refused to respond. Naida was not frozen. The dog stepped forward, positioning herself between Karina and the bear. She was shaking, her entire body trembling with fear, but she did not retreat. She did not run. She barked, sharp, loud, aggressive barks that echoed through the forest. She snapped her teeth. She stamped her front paws. She made herself look as large and threatening as a 40-pound dog possibly could. The bear studied her. For a long moment, nothing happened. The bear stood there, watching this strange, noisy creature defend the small human behind her. It was curious, perhaps, or confused, or simply weighing its options. Then it huffed once, a sound like a giant exhale, and turned away. It disappeared into the forest, the sound of its footsteps fading until silence returned. Naida kept barking for another full minute before finally going quiet. Then she turned around, walked back to Karina, and licked the tears that were streaming down the girl's face. They had survived. Again. Stop right now. I need you to share this video. Not later. Not when you have time. Right now. Because somewhere in your contacts is someone who's facing their own wilderness. Someone who feels lost. Someone who feels alone. Someone who's wondering if anyone sees them, if anyone cares, if there's any point in continuing. This story could be the thing that saves them. Share it to your story. Text it to a friend. Send it to your family group chat. Post it on your timeline. You never know whose life you might change with a single share. Do it now. I'll wait. Asterisk, asterisk. Now let me tell you what happened when the search party gave up. Day 7. At the Search Command Center, a temporary tent city erected at the edge of the forest, a grim meeting was taking place. The search had involved over 100 volunteers from surrounding villages, professional rescue teams from Yakutsk, helicopters with thermal imaging, tracking dogs, drones, every resource the regional government could spare. They'd found nothing. No tracks, no clothing, no signs of the child. It was as if Karina had simply vanished into thin air. The search commander, a veteran rescuer who had led dozens of operations, stood before the assembled team with a face carved from stone. "We've covered every grid section twice," he said. "We've searched over 3,000 square kilometers. The thermal imaging has found nothing." He paused. Everyone knew what was coming. Based on survival estimates for a child of this age, in these conditions, without food or shelter, another pause. It is the official recommendation of this team that the search be suspended. Suspended. A polite word for "we're giving up." Karina's mother screamed. It was a sound that would haunt everyone present for the rest of their lives. A raw, animalistic wail of grief that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her throat. Her husband caught her as she collapsed. "My baby," she kept repeating. "My baby, my baby, my baby." The search parties packed up. The helicopters flew away. The volunteers returned to their villages, carrying the heavy weight of failure. The forest had won. The child was gone. Asterisk, asterisk. But 9 miles into the forest, Karina was still alive. She was weak, dangerously weak. 7 days of berries and stream water had kept her alive, but they hadn't kept her strong. She could barely walk now. Her feet were swollen, infected, covered in cuts that wouldn't heal. Every step was agony, but she was breathing. Naida was struggling too. The dog had given everything, her body heat, her protection, her survival instincts, and it was taking a toll. She was thinner than she had ever been. Her eyes had lost some of their brightness. She panted constantly, even when the temperature was cool. They were both running out of time. On day 8, Karina couldn't walk anymore. She simply sat down on the forest floor and refused to move. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. Her head felt fuzzy. She was so tired, so incredibly tired, that even keeping her eyes open felt like too much effort. "Naida," she whispered. "I'm tired." The dog lay down beside her, pressing close. She whimpered softly, a sound of distress, of worry, of helplessness. They stayed like that for 2 days. Karina drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she was awake enough to eat the berries Naida brought her, dropping them from her mouth directly in front of the girl's face. Sometimes she was too weak even for that. The line between sleep and unconsciousness blurred. On the morning of day 10, something changed in Naida. The dog had been lying with Karina through another cold night, but now she stood. She walked a few feet away, then came back. She walked away again, then returned. She was agitated, restless. Something was brewing behind those brown eyes. Karina watched her through half-closed lids. "Naida? What's wrong?" The dog stopped pacing. She stood perfectly still, looking at Karina. Then she looked toward the direction of the village, the direction her nose told her home lay. Then she looked back at Karina. She was making a calculation. For 10 days, Naida had stayed. She had protected, warmed, fed, and comforted this little girl through everything the wilderness had thrown at them. She had never considered leaving, but staying wasn't working. Karina was dying. Slowly, inevitably dying. And there was nothing Naida could do about it. She couldn't carry the girl to safety. She couldn't signal for help. She couldn't make the humans come find them. Unless the thought, if dogs have thoughts in the way we understand them, crystallized slowly. She could go. She could find the humans. She could bring them back. It was risky. It meant leaving Karina alone, vulnerable to cold, to predators, to everything. But staying meant watching her die. Naida made her choice. She walked to Karina, licked her face one final time, and whimpered. It was a goodbye, an apology, a promise. Then she turned and ran. Naida ran like she had never run before. She was exhausted, malnourished, dehydrated. Every instinct told her to slow down, to conserve energy, to find food and rest. She ignored all of it. Her nose led the way, through dense undergrowth, around impassable marshland, across streams and clearings and endless miles of identical forest. She ran until her paws bled, until her lungs burned, until her legs threatened to collapse. But she kept running. 9 miles. That was the distance between Karina and the village. For a healthy dog on a clear path, it might take an hour or two. For a half-starved dog navigating wilderness, it took almost 6 hours. But she made it. Before I tell you what happened when Naida reached the village, I need you to do something. If you haven't already liked this video, do it now. This story deserves to be seen by millions. It deserves to inspire everyone who's lost hope. And if you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? You made it this far. You're invested. You care about Karina and Naida as much as I do. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Join this community of people who believe in miracles. ***. Now let me tell you about the moment everything changed. When Naida emerged from the forest at the edge of Olam village, she was almost unrecognizable. Her fur was matted with mud and blood. Her ribs were visible through her skin. She was limping. Her front left paw had been torn open somewhere along the way. She looked like a dog that had been through war. But her eyes were on fire. She ran into the village center, barking. Not normal barking, frantic, desperate, almost screaming barking. She ran to one villager after another, circling them, nipping at their heels, running toward the forest and then back again. What's wrong with that dog? Isn't that the Chikitova's dog? Wasn't she lost with the girl? That last question changed everything. Old Fantasy Nikolaev, a hunter who had spent 60 years reading the behavior of animals, was watching from his porch. He had seen many things in his life. He had seen dogs mourn their owners. He had seen dogs travel impossible distances to return home. But he had never seen a dog try this hard to communicate something. "That dog isn't running away," he said slowly. "She's trying to lead us somewhere." The girl, a fantasy, nodded. "Get the search party. Now." Within an hour, a new search party had assembled. They didn't have helicopters this time. They didn't have professional rescue teams. Just 12 villagers with rifles, flashlights, and a desperate hope that a dog could do what technology had failed to do. Find a girl. Naida was waiting at the edge of the forest. The moment she saw the humans gathering, she barked once, sharp, commanding, and disappeared into the trees. They followed. The dog moved fast, but she kept looking back, making sure the humans were still there. When someone fell behind, she slowed. When they caught up, she sped ahead. She was leading them with an intelligence that bordered on eerie. "I've never seen anything like this," a fantasy muttered. "That dog knows exactly where she's going." 9 miles. The same distance Naida had run that morning. But with humans in tow, moving through difficult terrain, it took over 4 hours. For hours that Karina might not have. The sun was beginning to set when they reached the clearing. Naida stopped. She turned to face the humans, barked once, then walked slowly toward a patch of tall grass. There was something in the grass. A fantasy approached first, his heart pounding. He pushed aside the grass with his walking stick, and what he saw made him gasp. Karina was lying on her side, curled into a fetal position. Her skin was pale, almost gray. Her lips were blue. Her eyes were closed. She wasn't moving. "No," someone behind him whispered. "No, no, no." A fantasy fell to his knees. He pressed his fingers to the girl's neck, searching for a pulse. His own heart was beating so loud that he couldn't tell if. There, faint, weak, but unmistakable. A pulse. "She's alive." His voice cracked. "She's alive. Radio for medical help. Now." The clearing erupted. People shouting. Radio crackling. Someone was crying. Maybe several people were crying. A helicopter was being dispatched from Yakutsk. Medical teams were mobilizing. But in the center of it all, something quiet was happening. Naida had walked to Karina's side and lay down beside her. She pressed her body against the girl, one last time, the same way she had done for 10 nights. Her tail wagged weakly. She had done it. She had brought help. ***. Karina's eyes fluttered, opened, focused on the furry face beside her. And despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the 11 days of hell, she smiled. "Naida," she whispered. "Good girl." Karina was airlifted to the nearest hospital that same night. The doctors who received her were prepared for the worst. 11 days in the wilderness. A 3-year-old child. No shelter, no supplies, no survival training. They expected to find a body barely clinging to life. What they found instead stunned them. Karina was dehydrated and malnourished. Her feet were badly injured, infected cuts, swelling, damage that would require weeks of treatment. She had insect bites covering nearly every inch of exposed skin, but she was alive and coherent and surprisingly strong. Asterisk. This shouldn't be possible, the lead physician said. A child this age, in those conditions for that length of time, survival rate is essentially 0. So how did she survive? A nurse asked. The doctor shook his head. I have no idea. When Karina was finally able to talk about what had happened, the full picture emerged. She told the doctors about Naida keeping her warm at night, about the berries and the stream water, about the bear that had come close, a really big bear, and how Naida had scared it away. Naida took care of me, she said matter-of-factly. She's my best friend. The medical team was astonished. They brought in veterinary experts, animal behaviorists, survival specialists. Everyone wanted to understand how a dog, without training, without instruction, had known exactly what to do to keep a child alive. The answers were both scientific and miraculous. Body heat * a dog's body temperature of 101 to 102 degrees Fahrenheit, shared through direct contact, would have been enough to prevent hypothermia on all but the coldest nights. Food-finding * dogs have evolved to find food in the wild. Naida's instincts led her to safe, edible berries that provided Karina with essential nutrients and hydration. Protection * a dog's senses are vastly superior to a human's. Naida would have detected predators long before they became a threat, giving them time to avoid confrontation. Navigation * this was the part that stumped everyone. How did Naida know to leave, find help, and lead rescuers back? This wasn't instinct. This was problem solving. This was something that bordered on human-like reasoning. We can't explain it, one animal behaviorist finally admitted. Scientifically, there's no framework for what this dog did. She made a calculated decision. She executed a plan. She saved a life. Some things, perhaps, aren't meant to be explained, only celebrated. Karina spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Her feet required minor surgery. Her body needed time to recover from malnutrition. But every day, she asked the same question. Where's Naida? I want to see Naida. The dog had been taken in by villagers, fed, bathed, treated by a veterinarian. She was recovering too, but slower than expected. The journey had taken more out of her than anyone realized. But there was another reunion that had to happen first. The helicopter had barely touched down at the hospital when Karina's mother burst through the doors. She had aged a decade in 11 days. Her eyes were hollow from sleepless nights. Her voice was gone from screaming her daughter's name into the forest. She had refused to eat, refused to rest, refused to accept what everyone told her was inevitable. And now her daughter was alive. Karina. The medical team tried to maintain order, tried to explain that the child needed careful handling, that there were protocols. The mother heard none of it. She pushed past doctors and nurses, running down the corridor until she saw the stretcher being wheeled toward the intensive care unit. Her baby, pale, thin, covered in insect bites and bandages, but breathing, alive. She collapsed beside the stretcher, gathering Karina into her arms with a desperation that made everyone step back. "My baby," she sobbed. "My baby, my baby, my baby." Karina, weak, exhausted, barely conscious, opened her eyes. "Mama, I'm here. Mama's here. I'm never letting you go again. Never, never, never." She held her daughter so tightly that a nurse gently suggested she might want to be careful of the 4 lines. The mother didn't care. She would have held that child through fire and flood and the end of the world itself. 11 days of agony dissolved in that embrace. Karina Chikitova arrived 20 minutes later. He had been out with one of the search parties when the radio crackled with the impossible news. He had run, literally run, the 3 miles back to the village, commandeered a vehicle, and driven to the hospital at speeds that should have killed him. His daughter was alive. Because of his dog, asterisk asterisk. He found his wife still holding Karina, both of them crying. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, unable to move. His hands were shaking. His legs felt like water. This was his fault. He was the one who had walked into the forest that morning. He was the one Karina had followed. If he had checked on her before leaving, if he had locked the door, if he had... Papa. Karina's small voice cut through his spiral of guilt. She was looking at him with those same dark eyes, tired but unmistakably alive. Papa, I tried to find you, but I got lost. The words broke him. He crossed the room in 3 steps, falling to his knees beside the bed, wrapping his arms around both his wife and daughter. He was a strong man, a cattle herder who had faced down wolves and survived Siberian winters, but now he wept like a child. I'm sorry, he kept saying. I'm so sorry. I should have. Papa. Karina's small hand touched his face. It's okay. Naida took care of me. Naida, the dog who had followed when he hadn't noticed. The dog who had stayed when he had walked away. The dog who had done what he should have done, protected his daughter. I know, baby, he whispered. I know she did. When Karina was finally discharged from the hospital, the entire village turned out. People lined a road from the medical center to the Chikitova home. They held signs. They cheered. Some threw flowers. Many cried. But Karina only had eyes for one thing. Naida was waiting on the porch. The dog had been bathed and fed, her fur brushed until it almost gleamed. But she was still thin, still bearing the marks of what she had endured. She stood at the edge of the porch, tail wagging so hard her whole body shook, whimpering with an excitement that was almost human. The car stopped. The door opened. Karina's father lifted her out, her feet still too damaged to walk properly, and carried her toward the house. Naida couldn't wait. She launched herself off the porch, running to meet them, jumping and spinning and barking. When Rodion set Karina down on the porch steps, the dog immediately climbed in her lap, licking her face, pressing against her, making sounds that were somewhere between barking and crying. I missed you too, Karina giggled, wrapping her arms around the dog's neck. I missed you so much. The village watched. The parents watched. Everyone watched this moment between a little girl and the dog who had saved her life. And in that moment, everything felt right. The Chikitova house was quiet. Karina was in her parents' bed. They refused to let her sleep alone, and she didn't want to. Her mother lay on one side, her father on the other, both of them touching her as if to confirm she was real. But someone was missing. Naida, Karina said suddenly. Where's Naida? Her mother started to explain that the dog was sleeping outside, in her usual spot on the porch. No, Karina's voice was firm. Tired but firm. She has to be here. She always keeps me warm. The parents exchanged a look. How do you say no to that? Rodion got up, opened the back door, and whistled softly. Naida bounded in immediately, as if she had been waiting for exactly this invitation. She jumped onto the bed, circled once, and settled herself directly on top of Karina, just as she had done for 11 nights in the wilderness. Good girl, Karina murmured, already half asleep. Good Naida. The dog sighed contentedly. The girl's breathing steadied. The parents lay awake for hours, watching their daughter sleep, watching the dog who had brought her home. A family, whole again, because of a love that defied explanation. Recovery wasn't instant. Karina's feet took 3 months to fully heal. She needed physical therapy to walk normally again. She had nightmares sometimes, dreams of endless trees and cold nights and being alone. But she was never really alone anymore. Naida was always there. When Karina woke from nightmares, Naida was at her side. When she took her first painful steps in physical therapy, Naida walked beside her. When she finally ventured back outside, into the yard she had once run across so carelessly, Naida was her shadow. The bond between them had always been strong. Now it was unbreakable. They're inseparable, Karina's mother told a reporter months later. We used to joke that Naida was Karina's second mother. Now we know it's true. The government of the Sakha Republic officially honored Naida with a certificate of bravery. Local officials came to the village for a small ceremony. Photographers captured images of the scruffy dog sitting beside a beaming Karina, a medal around her neck that she kept trying to chew. But the real honors came from the people who knew the story best. The villagers made sure Naida never wanted for anything again. The best scraps from every table. The warmest spot by every fire. The respect and love of everyone who had searched those forests hoping for a miracle. They had witnessed something extraordinary. They would never forget it. Asterisk, asterisk. Years passed. Karina grew from a toddler into a child, from a child into a teenager, from a teenager into a young woman. She went to school. She made friends. She learned about the world beyond the village. But she never forgot. How could she? The scars on her feet were permanent reminders. The story was told and retold in her family, in her village, in newspapers and documentaries that occasionally came calling. She was the girl who survived, a living miracle. And through it all, Naida was there. The dog aged faster than Karina, of course. Dogs always do. Her muzzle went gray. Her steps slowed. The energy that had once sent her running 9 miles through wilderness faded into a gentler, quieter devotion. But every night, she still slept at the foot of Karina's bed. Every morning, she still greeted the girl with the same wagging tail. Every moment, she still watched over her charge with the same protective love. Some bonds don't weaken with time. They only deepen. Asterisk, asterisk. Naida lived to be old for a dog of her breed and history. The veterinarian said it was remarkable. The wilderness ordeal should have shortened her life. Instead, she seemed to thrive in the years that followed, as if saving Karina had given her a purpose that kept her going. But no dog lives forever. The end came peacefully on a spring morning when Karina was a teenager. Naida simply didn't wake up. She was lying in her favorite spot, a patch of sunlight by the window where she could watch both the forest and her girl. Karina found her there. She didn't scream, didn't cry out. She simply sat down beside her old friend, gathered that gray head into her lap, and held her one last time. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." The family buried Naida in the yard, beneath the tree where she used to sleep on summer days. They marked the spot with a simple stone. Naida, the dog who never gave up, beloved forever. Karina is an adult now. She has her own life, her own path. But she carries Naida with her, not just in memory, but in the lessons that 11 days in the wilderness taught her. That love is stronger than logic. That loyalty can move mountains. That sometimes the smallest and scruffiest among us become the greatest heroes. She tells the story to anyone who will listen. To children who need to believe in miracles. To adults who have forgotten that the impossible sometimes happens. To anyone who has ever felt alone in their own wilderness. I should have died, she says. Every expert, every calculation, every statistic says I should have died. But a dog who loved me decided otherwise. And that made all the difference. Here's what I want you to carry from this story. The helicopters couldn't find Karina. The search teams couldn't find Karina. The thermal imaging couldn't find Karina. But a scruffy, half-starved, 40-pound dog found a way to save her. Not because she was trained. Not because she was special. Not because she had any advantage that technology didn't have. Because she loved that little girl enough to refuse to give up. That's the miracle. Not the survival statistics defied. Not the predators avoided. Not the miles run on bleeding paws. The miracle is love. Love that stays when leaving would be easier. Love that fights when surrender would be safer. Love that runs through 9 miles of wilderness because somewhere someone needs help. That's what Naida had. That's what Naida gave. Asterisk, asterisk. And that's what this story asks of all of us. What would you run through to save someone you love? Karina's mother never forgot the moment she heard her daughter was alive. She never forgot the sound of her own scream when they said the search was over. She never forgot falling to her knees and believing, for one terrible day, that she had lost her child forever. But mostly, she never forgot the lesson. I prayed for a miracle, she said once, in an interview years later. I prayed for God to save my daughter, and he did. He just used a dog to do it. Maybe that's how miracles work. They don't come with trumpets and lightning. They come with 4 paws and a wagging tail. They come in forms we don't expect, through beings we underestimate, at moments when we've given up hope. The miracle is always love. The form it takes is always a surprise. Asterisk, asterisk. So tonight, if you have a dog, hold them a little closer. Thank them for their loyalty, even if they've never been tested the way Naida was. And if you're in your own wilderness right now, lost, scared, wondering if anyone is coming for you, remember this. Help is on the way. It might not look like what you expected. It might come through a door you never noticed. It might have 4 legs and a cold nose and breath that smells like dog food. But it's coming. Because somewhere, someone loves you enough to run through wilderness on bleeding paws. Someone loves you enough to never give up. Someone loves you enough to find a way. That's the promise Naida kept. And it's the promise love always keeps. Asterisk, stay hopeful, stay faithful, and hold tight to everyone who runs through wilderness for you. They're the real miracles. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. I'll see you in the next story.